Happy Friday, Lucky District 7. Following the state, Denver is now gradually moving to reopen and slowly ease the restrictions that have been in place. Tomorrow, Denver's stay-at-home order will end. This does not mean that COVID-19's threat to public health is past. It remains very real. But it means that all of your hard work staying at home has been working. Our hospital and healthcare systems have not been overwhelmed, and our public health officials believe that we can start to implement a path forward that preserves health and safety while easing these restrictions. Remember, dealing with this health crisis will be a marathon, not a sprint, and we are nowhere near the finish line yet. Starting tomorrow, Denver will slowly start to reopen. Some businesses will be allowed to reopen with 50% of employees returning to some in-person work, as long as strict social distancing and face covering guidelines are in place. Public and private gatherings of more than 10 people will continue to be prohibited through May 26th. Sit-down service in bars, restaurants, and coffee shops will remain closed, as will movie theaters, concert venues, team sports and gyms, and outdoor recreation facilities like playgrounds, pools, tennis courts, and basketball courts. Please visit denvergov.org for the most up-to-date information on what is open, what is allowed, and what is not. Even though the stay-at-home order is being lifted, everyone is still urged to stay at home unless absolutely necessary. This hasn't been easy for any of us, but it is a necessary step to ensure the health and safety of our community, and it's important now to ensure that we don't overwhelm our healthcare systems as we slowly reopen, which could force us to have to go back to a stay-at-home order down the road. We are all ready for this to be over, and I was certainly hoping that by Mother's Day, my family would be able to get together, have lunch together, and I'll give my mom a big hug to thank her for everything she's done for us. But unfortunately, we're just not there yet. Instead, we'll all have to find a safe and more physically distant way to thank our moms this year. So I'm going to start right here on Facebook. Thank you, Ma. I love you. When this is all over, we're going to have a big party to celebrate all of the things that we couldn't. Thanks for being the best mom ever. Have a great Friday, everyone. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. And I'll wrap up with the highlights from the mayor's press conference earlier this week about transitioning out of the stay-at-home order in Denver.
We've also had nearly 3,500 cases of COVID-19 in our community and 17,000 statewide. This virus is very much a part of our lives, and it will be with us for the foreseeable future. When it comes to testing, we now have the ability to do at least 1,000 swab tests a day, and we'll ramp up from there. We also did a canvass of hospitals and other clinics last week, and they told us that combined, they could do nearly 3,000 additional swab tests. In partnership with Denver Health, the Denver Police Department, and city employees, we are also on track to have at least 100 trained contact tracers. These efforts will give us a better lay of the land on the spread of the virus. We're going to do everything we can to help them ramp up the capacity on both sides, as well as ensure that residents in our underserved communities and vulnerable populations have increased access to tests. And I'm excited to say that we'll be launching a mobile testing process soon, and you'll hear more about that in just a few moments. Based on our residents' efforts, the data we're seeing, and guidance from public health experts, we feel comfortable at this time not extending Denver's stay-at-home order beyond this Friday, May 8th, and starting the phased reopening of our city beginning on Saturday, May 9th. So here's what our residents can expect going forward. As you heard last week, a face covering requirement in certain public settings goes into effect tomorrow. A face covering doesn't have to be a surgical or N95 mask. It can be a bandana, a modified t-shirt, some of your ski gear, or clothing covering you can make at home. As long as it covers your nose and mouth, it'll work. This goes for anyone over the age of 3, except for people who have a medical condition that would prevent them from being able to wear a face covering. Residents and employees will be required to wear face coverings while inside of or waiting in line to enter certain businesses or locations, including any retail or commercial business, their common areas and enclosed spaces like an elevator, any government building where essential public functions are taking place, at a bus stop, on the bus, or in a ride share or car for hire, and facilities offering healthcare services. To be clear, you don't need to wear a face covering if you're out for a walk, exercising outdoors, or driving in your car. It's only for certain public settings, the certain public settings that I just mentioned. But I still strongly recommend, and I want to say this very clearly, I strongly recommend wearing one when you're out and about. So we have as much continuity as possible. We will be aligning with the guidelines laid out by the governor in his Safer at Home phase. Starting Saturday, these businesses can start to reopen. Offices with only 50% of their employees on site and 6 feet of physical distancing between them. Retail businesses with only 50% of their employees on site and 6 feet of physical distancing available between customers. Places like hair and nail salons, tattoo parlors, pet groomers, and personal trainers with 10 or fewer people in a single location or a maximum of 50% occupancy, whichever is less. By appointment only, with no walk-ins, and strict requirements for PPE and physical distancing. The eye doctor, chiropractor, or other limited healthcare facilities with 10 or fewer people in a single location, or a maximum of 50% occupancy, whichever is less. And by appointment only, no walk-ins. Services that must be done on site, like in-person real estate showings, and our college campuses and buildings. I also want to reinforce the state's direction. If you're a business or an office that can reopen, but can still operate with your employees working from home, we strongly encourage you to do that. In order to reopen, businesses must have several protective measures in place to keep employees and the public as safe as possible. Employees and customers should start to see things like special hours for vulnerable populations, 6 feet of physical distancing between people, symptoms, and temperature checks, and closure or frequent disinfecting of common spaces. These and other requirements for reopening will be available for review, again, on the city's website, denvergov.org.